The Security Council calls for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza, but the airstrikes and shelling goes on. More Palestinian children are killed and wounded on the festival of Eid. The UN says the shooting down of a Malaysian passenger plane over Ukraine may be a war crime. An environmental catastrophe. Libya appeals for help as fighting sparks oil fires. Plus,
I'm Bernard Smith in northern Sudan, where a rush for gold is threatening the country's ancient heritage.
We begin in Gaza, where fighting and airstrikes continue despite a plea by the United Nations Security Council for a ceasefire. These are the latest pictures of an airstrike inside Gaza a short while ago. According to medical sources, tank shelling has also killed another Palestinian child in East Jabalia. 2 other children were wounded when their house was hit. The UN has appealed for an immediate and unconditional humanitarian ceasefire. The Security Council held an emergency meeting in New York and issued a statement calling for a truce to allow aid to be delivered. Israel and Hamas, though, are still unable to agree on the terms for any ceasefire. Meanwhile, people in Gaza City have been praying after the end of Ramadan and the start of the Muslim Eid festival. In a moment, I'll be speaking to our diplomatic editor in West Jerusalem. But first, let's go to Nicole Johnston in Gaza. And Nicole, it had been fairly quiet until a short time ago, and then it seems the operation has resumed. Tell us what's been happening.
The reports are that there's been 3 separate airstrikes in Gaza, one in the Nusrat camp area, another one in Zaytun, and a third one we haven't pinpointed exactly where that hit. But those airstrikes appear to have hit empty land areas, so they haven't hit houses, and this is quite common. Israel regularly sort of hits areas of empty land, partly as a warning or to create fear in a neighbourhood. So far those airstrikes haven't killed anyone, but as you reported in the introduction, we have had some activity in the Jabalia refugee camp area. This is very close to Gaza City. There has been ground combat between fighters from the Al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, with Israeli soldiers. Tank shells have been fired into that area, and as you said, 1 child has been killed.
And Nicole, over the past 3 weeks, there has been huge damage caused by this military operation. What is that going to mean for the Gazan economy going forward?
Well, the economy is not something we've talked about a lot over the last couple of weeks, but it has been devastated by what's been going on. You know, shops have been closed, businesses haven't been operating at all. The whole of the Gaza Strip has really been shut down while everyone's been at home. So people haven't been earning salaries, businesses haven't been earning any money at all. You know, it's very difficult for people, even though we've seen lots of lines of people outside of banks. You know, most people won't have earned anything for the last few weeks. The other big issue has been electricity. Businesses that have opened have had to spend a fortune on fuel to run generators to try and open their businesses for a few hours a day, and most of the businesses that we've spoken to have said they haven't made any money, but they've just been trying to keep their shops open on occasion so that at least people will have somewhere to go and to buy meat or produce or whatever it is that they need. The other huge issue is the hundreds of houses and neighbourhoods that have been destroyed. Getting construction material in here is always very difficult. Israel only allows construction material into Gaza for approved United Nations projects, so that means for the average Palestinian, trying to get cement or aggregate to rebuild is often almost impossible.
Nicole, thanks for that. Nicole Johnson in Gaza there. Let's cross to James Bowes, who's in West Jerusalem for us. And James, this Security Council statement calling for a humanitarian ceasefire, what's been the reaction to that?
Well, as you wouldn't be surprised, the Israelis and the Palestinians don't agree on this statement. I think the Israelis privately are not happy with the language because there is criticism, not direct criticism, Israel's not mentioned, but there is criticism, I think, of Israeli policies because there's criticism of the growing Palestinian death toll. On the Palestinian side, they would like something much tougher. This is a statement from the Security Council. It expresses the view of the Security Council. It is not though, a binding legal resolution, and that's what the Palestinians would like, a UN Security Council resolution. Whenever they've tried to draft one, though, they've faced difficulty because the US is very much supportive of Israel when it comes to any action in the Security Council. Immediately after the Security Council meeting, both the Israeli and Palestinian ambassadors spoke to reporters.
The business of the Security Council is maintaining international peace and security, and they should have adopted a resolution long time ago to condemn this aggression and to call for this aggression to be stopped immediately, to provide the Palestinian people with protection, and to lift the siege against our people in the Gaza Strip.
We did everything we could to avoid this conflict, but Hamas refused to stop the attacks. Israel agreed to 5 ceasefire proposals. Hamas rejected or broke all of them, even the ones that they requested by themselves. Every single time the international community called for a ceasefire, we seized and Hamas fired.
And James, within Israel, more castigation of US efforts to bring about a permanent end to the fighting.
Yes, Julian, I think it's going to make it very hard for the US and for Secretary of State John Kerry, who's been playing this mediator role. He was here for a whole week seeing everyone involved, every single regional player, as well as coming here to Jerusalem. It's going to be very hard, I think, for him to play the same role now, because certainly in Israeli media and Israeli political circles, he's being criticised. Let me show you here. This is just one newspaper here, and on the front page it says, "Reckless Kerry risks causing an escalation," and similar articles in the press, whether they are right-wing or left-wing, across the political spectrum. There is criticism, pretty unprecedented criticism, of the US Secretary of State.
James, thank you for that. James Bays, our diplomatic editor in West Jerusalem there. Well, in Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank, a memorial has been held for those killed in Gaza. Several members of the Palestinian government were there, including Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah, who said they were doing all they could to help.
I would like to send our deepest sympathy with our brothers, our families in Gaza who are suffering due to this Israeli aggression. We are doing our utmost to stop this aggression as immediate as possible. The government has been involved, from the beginning, on the first day, in securing food, medical supplies, fuel. This is our duty, actually. This is a must for us that we have to do for our people in Gaza.
Ben White is an author and journalist specialising in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, who joins us now live from London. Ben, good to have you with us. Can we start with the deteriorating relations between US and Israel? There was a fairly blunt phone call from President Obama to Prime Minister Netanyahu, wasn't there?
Yeah, from what we've heard about the contents of that phone call, President Obama was telling Netanyahu that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire, and that is a strategic imperative in Obama's language. And that took place in the context of a couple of days of quite bitter on and off the record briefings by Israeli and American officials, all centering really around a draft ceasefire proposal that Kerry put to the Israelis late on Friday. And the Israelis felt that this did not address their own concerns. The bulk of the proposal was repeating to a large extent things that had been heard before, to do with basing negotiations for a longer-term ceasefire on the November 2012 ceasefire agreement. It talked about opening up the Gaza crossings for movements of goods and people, and it also mentioned Israeli quote-unquote security concerns. But Israel responded to that by claiming that Kerry had given a quote-unquote prize to terrorism and talked about it as being a sort of concession to Hamas. Of course, remembering that the demand for an end of the blockade is not quote-unquote a Hamas demand, but is in fact a demand of all of the Palestinian people, especially in the Gaza Strip, and is a demand that's been made by numerous NGOs as well for some years now.
Is there also a question over how the Palestinian leadership has handled all of this? We saw a clip earlier from the Palestinian Prime Minister saying, yes, we have done everything we possibly can. Is that the case? Is that the feeling?
I mean, there are some options open to the Palestinian leadership in Ramallah and open to Mahmoud Abbas, in particular in relation to this latest massacre. I'm thinking of the way in which they have a choice, if they want to accede to the Rome Statute and request sort of the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court in the occupied territories. That's an option that's open for them, and it's been open to them for some time. They've already been urged to take that step by Palestinian human rights groups and by the likes of Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and others. And that's already been mentioned in the context of Israeli settlements. Now, in the light of the atrocities that we've seen in Gaza, I think the pressure on Abbas and the leadership in Ramallah to take that sort of step will only intensify.
Finally, Ben, we saw the UN Security Council pleading for a humanitarian ceasefire to take place in Gaza. On the basis of what's been happening in the last couple of hours, it doesn't look like either side are going to take that offer up. What's it going to take for a ceasefire to be put in place so that negotiations then can continue?
It's going to take pressure, and I think primarily it's going to take American pressure on Israel, because the basics are pretty clear to everybody. The demands that the PA have agreed to, or they've sort of concurred with Hamas on these basic demands to do with the lifting of the blockade, to do with also sort of releasing prisoners. There's been the issue of paying salaries to public employees in Gaza. Those basics are on the table, but from Israel's point of view, there is a strong sort of position within the Israeli government that not only sees those as unacceptable, but actually would like to continue the operation further. So what we've seen today, which is sort of a relative speaking calm, albeit still with attacks taking place, that might not stay the same. There could be a further escalation without that diplomatic pressure taking place.
Ben, thank you very much indeed for that. Ben White speaking to us from London there. And you can stay up to date with the situation in Gaza around the clock by going to our website. We've got a live blog with breaking news, videos and updates from our correspondents on the ground. That's at aljazeera.com.